After living in San Diego for nearly 3 years, I finally took a road trip to Death Valley. I arrived just after sunset, so unfortunately I missed a lot of the good light. However, I was still able to get out of my Jeep and get 2 long exposure images in the sand dunes. This image captures the glowing sunset sky off to the west, twilight off to the east, and just a handful of stars starting to poke through. This next image is an iconic Death Valley feature that I've been wanting to see for some time. Patterns of dry, cracked mud that used to be a lake bed underneath all of the sand dunes. Normally white under the harsh daylight of midday, the scene was glowing a dark blue, purple hue with the twilight sky overhead. I heard coyotes all around me, so I decided I'd better head back, call it a night, and head back to the dunes first thing in the morning. Actually with a headlamp this time. Good morning, everybody. I am out in Death Valley exploring the sand dunes. The sun's about half an hour from rising, so I'm going to keep hiking back this direction. Hiking a mile through the sand dunes is equivalent to at least 4 or 5 on regular ground. Got a section of dry lake bed with a desert bush growing off just on the corner of it. As you can't quite see on the video, but right up above there's a glowing half moon. The sky is just starting to change off to the left, glowing nice and orange, while the twilight blue is off to the right. Here is the composition that I've got set up. You can see just a little bit of the ripples in the sand down at the bottom, the section of dry lake bed, the little shrub, mountains in the background, and the half moon just up above the top of the frame. So I'm going to zoom right in on the leaves and branches, hoping to get these nice and sharp. Set at f10, so the rest of the image should be sharp throughout the frame. About a 1-second exposure, ISO 100. It's getting a little bit brighter, so nothing quite as long as last night. It looks like the sunrise light is just starting to catch the clouds over on top of the dunes, so I'm going to hike up to the top of this dune, see if I can't get a better view. Alright, well I did find this dry lake bed patch behind me, and I doubt it's going to be my favorite image from the trip, but it looks a little bit like an oasis, and the sun was lighting up the clouds right behind it for sunrise, so I stopped real quick to grab the image, but I don't know, I might crop it a little, play with the aspect ratio. I'm not sure I'm entirely sold on how I framed it up, so we'll see. But it looked nice, and yeah, I think I'm going to put on a telephoto lens and try to find a better view of the dunes before the light breaks over the mountains and starts lighting them up. Just behind me, in the other direction from this view, was another good view of the sunrise. At the moment, I couldn't decide which I liked better. Which do you prefer? Let me know in the comments below. Alright, so now that the clouds are done lighting up, I'm going to start looking for some more interesting shapes and patterns in the dunes. And one of them, I don't know if you can see, is right here. It's this weird shape of rock that's kind of in the shape of the crescent moon. And I put on my 100 to 400 and zoom right in on it with some of the sand ripples around it. I think it'll make for a cool kind of abstract image. Might make it black and white. I'm not sure yet. But so this is how I've got this image all framed up. If I zoom out, you can see how it's just this little slice of mud kind of on its own. Manual focus right on the edge, nice and sharp. Make sure there's no vibration, no wind. F10, ISO 100, about 1/15 of a second. Alright, well, as you can see, the light is finally starting on the dunes, so I put on my 100 to 400 and I'm picking out things in the scene that I like with the sweeping lines of shadow and light. And if I move over this way, you can see there's this one little shrub that's kind of sitting in this arc of shadow with the dunes behind it. So I'm zoomed in right on that composition with some of the dunes behind it and compressing the scene a bit. So you can see the way that I've got the image composition set up. I'm catching just a little bit of this dune on the bottom, kind of showing the gradient from light back into shadow. The one desert shrub sitting by itself with some sand dune wavy patterns around it, and then all the dunes cascading behind it off into the distance. So I focus right in onto the top of this little shrub's leaves, F9, ISO 100, about a 40th of a second, so not so worried about wind. Alright, so I'm not sure if this is even going to work, but I'm going to give it a try. I'm thinking black and white, but we'll see how the color turns out. But I framed up a composition where I'm tracing the edge of this sand dune as it winds down, zoomed into about 110 mil, so pretty zoomed out for the 100 to 400. Trying to compress the scene, find some leading lines, and yeah, I might try to go wander around a little bit after I get this one. But F10, ISO 100, 110 mil. See how it looks. Taking a quick break. Have you ever had so much sand in your shoes that it's actually painful? guess I'm not surprised. One of the coolest things about wandering around through the dunes is it seemed like no matter where I looked, there was always something interesting to photograph. Especially once I put on my 100 to 400, even far off dunes in the distance made for interesting subjects. The light was getting harsher, so I knew at the time that these would end up being black and white images. I have framed up this one dune off in the distance, just kind of rolling and sweeping with the light and the shadows really producing quite a bit of contrast now that the sun's getting higher and the mountains in the background. So I like this one quite a bit. I'm zoomed in really tight, right at about 400 mil, focused right on the top of the far off dune in the distance, f10, ISO 100. So one last real quick tip, always remember to check the vertical orientation too. I actually think this looks even better than the horizontal version I had framed up a couple of minutes ago. So it's getting windier. I dropped my aperture down to f8 to get a little bit faster of a shutter speed. But I really like the way that these are kind of sweeping off into the distance with the mountain peak in the background. Zooming all the way in, making sure that there's no vibration. You can see the wind really moving it. I like how this dune, maybe 3 dunes, kind of zigzags off into the distance, and then there's one dune in front of it that's just this sweeping arc formation. I'm zooming in as far as I can to cut out some of the distractions of the other dunes in the distance and making sure that there's no bright sky in the background. So focused in right on the middle dune in the background, f10, ISO 100. Zoom in, make sure there's no wind. Well, it's been a fun first morning here in Death Valley at the sand dunes. It's getting a little bit warmer, so I'm gonna head back to my car and drop the jacket off and, I don't know, maybe head into town, get some lunch, some late breakfast, figure out what I want to do for the rest of the day. Alright, this is the last image I'm going to take, and then I'm definitely going to go get some breakfast. But you can see right here, somewhere down there, there's a leaf that landed in the sand. So you can see I've got this one little leaf framed up kind of off to the left, while the interference pattern from the wind is trailing off to the right. The The sun is coming in at an angle that it's still accentuating the patterns in the sand, and I don't know. It kind of reminds me of the comet that we saw last summer. So I am zoomed right in on the leaf itself. Focus nice and sharp. I'm taking a little bit of a different approach. I'm at f5.6, hoping that some of this sand in the corner will fall off as it drifts down the dune. ISO 100, 1/500th of a second, very fast shutter speed, about 40 millimeters. And with that, I think I'll call it a morning.
By the time I made it to the top of this dune, I could see my Jeep parked off in the distance. I was incredibly hungry and ready for a fresh cup of coffee. Then, it was time to hit the road to check out some of the other sights to see in Death Valley. Thanks as always for watching, and I look forward to sharing the rest of my trip. See you next time.